Welcome to Sarder TV, an idea-sharing platform founded by Russell Sarder, who's an author, investor, and the CEO of Netcom Learning and AI Certs. We're really excited to have our guest, Guy Kawasaki, join us today. Guy joins us remotely from California, and we're here to talk about his new book, Think Remarkable: 9 Paths to Transform Yourself and Make a Difference. So, Guy, it's really an incredible honor to have you here. You have this amazing, multifaceted career. You've been the chief evangelist of Apple. You're currently the chief evangelist of Canva. You're the creator of the Remarkable People podcast. You've been the brand ambassador of Mercedes-Benz. You've written 16 books and so many other things, right? So I'm going to turn it over to you to start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your career journey.
Well, it seems to me that you've already described the highlights. What more can I add? I live in California. I'm from Honolulu, Hawaii. And as you heard, I used to be the chief evangelist of Apple. I am currently the chief evangelist of Canva. I'm the host of the Remarkable People podcast. And in my checkered past, I've also been on the board of trustees of Wikipedia, Mercedes-Benz brand ambassador, started several companies. I've been a venture capitalist, and oh yeah, I wrote 16 books along the way. So yeah, that's my story in a nutshell.
Yes, and so this new book that you've written, Think Remarkable: 9 Paths to Transform Yourself and Make a Difference. It includes insights from over 200 great people, Carol Dweck, Steve Wozniak, Jane Goodall, that's just to name a few. Tell us what inspired you to write this book.
Well, what inspired me is royalty. No. What inspired me is that we have this podcast, and it's about 5 years old now. So it's really like 250 guests now. And this means that there's 250 hours of finished episodes. It's also about 4,000 or 5,000 pages of transcripts. And we thought no one's going to listen to that much or read that much. So we need to cut it down and just put the most informational and inspirational stuff in it. And that's what this book is. It's a summary of 250 interviews and 40 years of my hand-to-hand combat on the front lines of tech.
Yeah. So how were you able to get so many remarkable people for your podcast and your book?
That's a complex question, actually. And so, first of all, I was very fortunate to have become friends with Jane Goodall. So the first person I thought of for the first episode, of course, is Jane Goodall. So once you have Jane Goodall as your first guest, things get easy because, who's going to turn you down? They're going to say, well, Jane Goodall was on, so, you don't have really remarkable people. I mean, nobody in their right mind is going to say, in fact, if anybody said that, they would not be eligible to be a guest. So, once you have Jane Goodall, then you get Steve Wozniak and Margaret Atwood, and it gets easier and easier. So that's part of it. Another part of it is that even the most famous, busy people, when they're coming out with a new book, they are looking for ways to get publicity. So they're actively seeking to be on podcasts. So that makes it a lot easier. It also means you have to read about 52 books a year, but that's, it comes with the territory.
Yeah.
And the bigger picture is that I was very fortunate to have a successful career at Apple. And part of that successful career at Apple meant that I was very visible as the Macintosh evangelist. So many people who use Macintoshes, and there millions of people who use Macintoshes, and I would make the case that the most creative and most remarkable people often use Macintoshes. So they had heard of me because of that. So they may not have known me personally, or I didn't know them personally, but they knew of me, and knowing of me was enough to get in the door.
Yeah. And you were Apple's chief evangelist. This is back in the 1990s. What inspired you to connect the book's title to Apple's iconic Think Differently campaign from 1997?
Yeah. Well, it was a real struggle, and I think any author listening to this can relate and empathize that one of the hardest parts of writing a book is figuring out the title and the subtitle. And I could almost make the case that writing the title and the subtitle is harder than writing the book. But so anyway, it was, many, many ideas for the book, like how to be remarkable, remarkable you, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, one of my friends who's mentioned in the book said, everybody loves the Think Different campaign. You should just call this Think Remarkable. And bada bing, bada bang. That was like instant. Yes, that's it.
And, your book reads more like a guide and a roadmap rather than this traditional book.
Yeah.
So why did you opt for this condensed sort of pocket pamphlet format versus a traditional 300-page book?
I opted for that format because that's the format I like to read. So, I have to be a voracious reader, and I kind of dislike books that are 250 pages about one topic. And I mean, if it takes you 250 pages to explain a topic, maybe you don't have all the topic, down pat yet. And so I thought of that, and then I thought, what Gen Z is going to want to read 250 pages about one topic? They want to read 2 or 3 pages, like a blog post is long for them, right? So basically, this book has 3 sections: growth, grit, and grace. Each section has 3 chapters. I'm kind of OCD, and I love tricolon. So I go for the tricolon sections, and I go for the tricolon chapters. And every chapter has headings about every 2 pages, because I've read many nonfiction books, and they go on for 5, 10, 15 pages without a subhead, and you completely lose track of what you're reading about. So all of this is meant to have the most user-friendly format. And the assumption is that smart people are reading my book, and after 2 or 3 pages, they understand the concept, and they either believe in it or they don't. But if I can't get them convinced in 2 or 3 pages, it's not like 247 more pages are going to do it.
Right. So what would you say after you say about 250 episodes of your podcast? What are some of the common mindset or some of the most common mindsets that seem to drive some of these remarkable people, regardless of their fields?
Well, I would say that, in a sense, that's what you've just described, what the book is. It's the commonality, the consistent information and inspiration that allowed people to make a difference and be remarkable. So, as I said, the sections, English is my first language. The sections are growth, grit, and grace, because everybody we talk to who's remarkable had to grow. And growing is not easy, so you need to have grit. And then once you have growth and grit and you achieve success, then truly you have arrived when you become gracious and you want to pay back and you want to help the next generation. So that pattern of growth, grit, and grace happened over and over again.
And so can you tell us a little bit more about each of these parts, growth?
Sure. Yeah.
Great growth and grace.
So growth is inspired by the work of Carol Dweck of Stanford. And she drew a dichotomy early in the 2000s about growth versus fixed mindset. So with the growth mindset, you believe you can learn new skills, you can try new things. The fixed mindset means that you cannot learn new things, and maybe even worse, if you are recognized for, success in one area, that if you try anything else and it's not easy, it means you weren't meant to do it. And it also means that you may risk your image and your self-image. So people who are successful and have the fixed mindset never try to do other things. People who are unsuccessful with the fixed mindset never try to do the first thing. And so that's the dichotomy. And it's all about, first of all, realizing that there is such a thing as growth. And as proof, I offer that I took up ice hockey at the age of 44, and I took up surfing at the age of 60, which is about 34 and 50 years too late, respectively. But that takes a growth mindset. And then the flip side of the growth mindset, as I said, is the grit mindset. Because when you take up ice hockey at 44, surfing at 60, you have to be gritty because you're too old to learn some of that stuff easily. So that's how it goes.
And then tell us a little bit more about the dichotomy of the fixed mindset.
Yeah.
And any specific examples that you could highlight about yourself, maybe in your own professional career, where you did hold a fixed mindset and now that you look back?
I think that I have been remarkably growth mindset because, or you could say that I am not a steady worker because I've done sales, I've done evangelism, I've done entrepreneurship, I've done venture capital, I did blogging, now I'm doing podcasting, I've written 16 books. So I've done a lot of different things, and I have not, it's very difficult to pigeonhole me, and like people say this in a quasi-negative manner that I'm an enigma because I wasn't just trying to be a startup entrepreneur. I wasn't just trying to be a Fortune 500, CXO. I tried all these different things.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So then what would you say is step one for someone wanting to make a difference and becoming remarkable?
Step one is to decide to make a difference. And this doesn't mean you have to be Jane Goodall. This means that you just have to make a difference. It could be to one person. It could be even yourself. But you have to decide to make a difference and make the world a better place. My definition of remarkable is that you have made the world a better place. You have made a difference. It's not because you're rich or famous. So, my podcast is called Remarkable People, not rich people, not famous people. And I don't think I have any billionaires as a guest. And, let's just say that if a billionaire, let's say private equity or billionaire hedge fund manager reached out and said, I want to be on your podcast, the answer is probably no, because I don't think you've made a difference and made the world a better place. And now I would say the one exception to that would be if Warren Buffett asked to be on my podcast, he would be on my podcast. I assure you of that. Yeah. But not, it seems like every day you read in the news, there's some news story about blah, blah, blah. A billionaire has decided that, Harvard isn't teaching the right courses, or Carnegie Mellon isn't teaching the right courses, or, that women should be not have as many self-determining rights about their bodies. And like all these things that start with blah, blah, a billionaire, I want to just throw up.
Well, I think that's where this is very different, right? Because again, like you said, you're talking about making a difference being distinct from the pursuits of wealth or fame or power. But I want you to talk a little bit more about how, because it could feel a little lofty or like something that somebody has a time to do or, has reached a certain place. What about an ordinary person who's just, working a job and trying to make ends meet?
Well, just working a job and trying to make ends meet, you could say is pretty remarkable today. These are challenging times. And, one of the things I noticed as I got older and older is that everybody you meet, like literally everybody you meet can do something better than you. I promise you that's true. So, you may think that, you're like some kind of high-tech executive and you're like a big deal. And then you meet somebody who's flight attendant on United Airlines or, a waiter or a waitress. And you're thinking, I'm like this hot shit guy. And you meet this person, but you know what? That person can surf better than you. This other person can cook better than you. This other person is a better father than you. I'm telling you, that's true. So it leads to, I think, a sense of humility that, you know what, just because you got more money, that doesn't mean you're better than anybody else.
You also reference Steve Jobs' commencement quote in your book to connect the dots looking backwards.
Yes.
Tell us how you've seen sort of dots connected backwards.
Oh my God. So, this is just more brilliance from Steve Jobs that I think when you're in the middle of it, or when you're in your beginning stages, you want to connect all the dots looking forward, and you want to say, okay, so I got this degree, I got this internship, I got this job, and this is where I'm going to end up. And I can like lay this perfectly linear, logical path. I have not found that to be true. And I think it's like totally random, often luck, that determines where you are. And I'll tell you that, a lot of people ask me, well, how is it that Jane Goodall wrote the foreword for your book? And let me tell you the story as an example of connecting dots. So yes, if you're an author of a nonfiction book, particularly a book like this about how to make a difference, I don't think there's anybody you would rather have write the foreword than Jane Goodall. Like no one alive would top that. And so, how did Guy get Jane Goodall? Well, I take you back to Honolulu, Hawaii, in like the mid 1960s, and I was going to a public school called Kalihi Elementary. And at Kalihi Elementary, there was a teacher named Trudy Akau, AKAU. And she convinced my parents that they should take me out of this school and put me in a private school so I could go to college. Luckily, my parents listened to her. They made all the sacrifices to make that happen. So now I get into this private school, and I can't even remember how I decided to do this, but for some reason I applied to Stanford, and by some miracle I got in. So now I go to Stanford, and I meet this guy named Mike Boych. And the reason why we became friends is because we both love cars. Now, the difference between me and him is that he came from a wealthy family and he had those cars. I came from a poor family and wanted to have those cars. So we became friends. And then 5, 6, 7 years later, after we graduated, he was working in the Macintosh division of Apple, and he hired me to be the second software evangelist. So now, because of nepotism, not because of my background in education or work experience, I get this job at Apple as a software evangelist. I do well in it. I become visible. And so now people all around the world have heard my name because of my Macintosh evangelism, one of whom is the director of TEDx Palo Alto. And she sends me an email one day and says, Jane Goodall has agreed to speak. Would you like to be the person who interviews her on stage? Well, holy shit. I mean, pinch me. What would I rather do that day? So luckily, my friend knew me and recommended me to her, and she had heard of me. So all this worked out. I interviewed Jane Goodall on stage. I become friends with her. We have remained friends. I went to her birthday party a couple months back. And so it was just a natural for me to ask her, of all people, to write the foreword. So now, the question you posed is like, give us an example of connecting the dots looking backwards. Well, I can tell you that I just connected all the dots for how it came to be that Jane Goodall wrote the foreword for this book. And that first dot was in Kalihi Elementary School in Honolulu, Hawaii, because of a teacher. That was the first dot that got me a foreword by Jane Goodall in this book.
That's right. Yeah, it's remarkable. Remarkable. And you also say becoming remarkable isn't the objective for remarkable people. What have you learned on your interviews? This is not what they're striving for.
Yeah. So listen, nobody that I interviewed told me that, I was striving for fame and fortune, that people would recognize me as being remarkable. For many of these people, they started from such a difficult and challenging place that mere survival was the challenge. And so they survived, they thrived, they made a difference. They made a difference to their lives. They made a difference to society. And at that point, when you make that much of a difference to the world has no choice but to consider you remarkable. And I think that's the key, that, this is not a self-help book. There will never be a Guy Kawasaki seminar at the Ritz-Carlton Half Moon Bay where in 2 days I'm going to teach you how to be remarkable for $5,000. It's never going to happen. Never will happen. And so, my calculation is that this book has 88 ways to make a difference. And if you make a difference and you be remarkable, then guess what? You will be called remarkable. And that's the key to understand, this is not chicken or egg. There's definitely a sequence.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about some technology too. So I know you cite some, sort of forgettable Apple products. What was the core difference that you think allowed Macintosh and iPod and iPhone and iPad to really revolutionize computing?
Well, the common point in all of that and what made those things is Steve Jobs. Without a doubt, Steve Jobs, people like to throw the V word around, visionary, but Steve Jobs truly was a visionary. And you could interpret him as in one of two ways, which is he either saw the future and brought it to the present, or he made what he wanted and he convinced you to want it too. Either way, you could interpret Steve Jobs. Both are true. So I think that the commonality is there. Now, okay, so that's the roots, that's the DNA of all those products. But if you look at it, the characteristics of the products themselves, it's all about empowering people. It's about a user interface that enables people to use it easily. It's also a kind of a industrial design that you can tell somebody really cared about the design and cared about elegance and minimalist and all this kind of stuff. So again, Steve Jobs just put the whole package together.
Yeah. I know you must get this question so much, but I'd love to hear about what it was like working at Apple back then and with Steve Jobs.
Well, I mean, some of the happiest and most challenging days in my life, everything you've read and heard and seen about Steve Jobs has an element of truth to it. He was very intimidating, very demanding. Actually, I would say he was scary to work for. And yet I would not trade that experience for anything. And the reason why I would not trade that experience is because I learned so much from him, and I learned how much I could do. And I learned such principles that have carried on for the rest of my life. And, I hope everybody gets to work for Steve Jobs once in their life. I mean, it was a formative experience. But again, I'm telling you, he intimidated me. It was scary to work for him. He scared me into doing good work.
That's great. Yeah, I think you're right. I think we all need somebody to work under in that way, just to learn. Are there any specific memories or points of time that you could remember a certain experience with him that kind of stands out?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't want to give the impression that I was in his inner circle and I was his best friend, because I wasn't. And it's kind of scary if you were in that inner circle. Let me tell you, there's pluses and minuses to be in that inner circle. Sure. So my favorite Steve Jobs story is one day I'm in my cubicle and I'm working, and he shows up with a stranger I never met before. And he says, he asked me, well, what do you think of this company called Nowhere? And it was an educational software company, knowledge software, truncated to Nowhere. So he asked me, what do you think of this company and its products? I said, Steve, the product is like mediocre. It's just drill and practice. The company is not that strategic for us. Doesn't really show off the Macintosh capabilities. And I start ripping on this product and this company. And then he turns to the guy and he turns to me, and then he says, Guy, I want you to meet the CEO of Nowhere. So that's what it was like working for Steve Jobs.
How did you save yourself from that?
Well, I mean, Well, okay. I will tell you that knowing Steve Jobs, here's the back channel story. The back channel story is probably that guy came for a meeting with Steve Jobs. And that guy was a big deal. He was very famous. And he probably came in for a meeting with Steve Jobs and he started telling, oh, Steve, my company is doing so well. We have such great products. And Steve, because Steve really, he had taste and he had the attitude to go look at stuff. Steve probably said, no, you're wrong. Your product is shit. And he said, no, absolutely, Steve, you are wrong. My product is great. We're selling so many. And Steve would have said, okay, let's go see Guy Kawasaki. He's my evangelist. He deals with all the software companies. Let's see what he thinks of your product. So then he comes out to me and explains that. I tell you the story already. And, and I tell him, this product is mediocre. And probably Steve went back with him and said, I told you, your product is shit. Guy just reinforced it. And I will also tell you that I believe if I told Steve and that guy that his product was great and Steve knew it was shit, he might have fired me on the spot. So I passed the test. I passed the test.
Good. So, we've mentioned that you've written 16 books. Tell us a little bit about your first book, your very first book, The Macintosh Way. How did you come about to write that?
So The Macintosh Way was written in 1987. I had been out of Apple for, maybe it was 89, and I had left Apple in 87. So I was 2 years out of Apple. I was in a startup company, and the company of which I was CEO, it had other shareholders and other early people that I just wasn't getting along with, and I knew there had to be a better way. So I wrote The Macintosh Way based on my experiences working in the Macintosh division, and it was about, how to do the right things the right way. So the book, in a sense, was cathartic because I could not do what I thought I should be doing as a CEO. So I wrote the book that I thought I should write to explain how to be the CEO I thought I should be. It's a long, complex story, but that first book was, and then I seriously, I really, really thought that that's my first and last book, that I had nothing else to say. And then I can tell you that I've now said 15 times, this is my last book.
So you've been pretty open about telling, in your interviews and such, that you did use AI to write the book.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about how you used it, why you used it, and have you gotten any sort of criticism for using it?
I use AI as a research assistant. I used it to help perfect my writing. I used it to help write summaries of each section. Each section, the last paragraph, sort of restates what the section said to provide, one last, like, this is what just happened in this section kind of section. And I think that's very important. And it is very difficult to write that because you've just finished the section and you're just so sick of it. You don't want to say it again one more time. So you let the computer figure that out, which worked out quite well, I thought. As a research assistant, I literally used it to find examples. So an example of that example is that I wanted to talk about people who switched careers and became great successes. And so I asked ChatGPT, give me a list of people who have changed careers and became very successful. And it said Julia Child. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, Julia Child was a spook who worked for the OSS, which became the CIA. And in her mid-30s, she got married and moved to France. And that's how she fell in love with French cooking. So she went from spy to French chef. And I had never heard that example before. That example would not be in the book if it were not for ChatGPT. So that ChatGPT, in my mind, is a research assistant who knows everything, is available 24/7, never is critical, never gets tired, and is $20 a month. I mean, how can you go wrong with that? There's nobody more bullish about AI than Guy.
Yeah. That's great. And have you received any criticism or anything for using it so far?
Not that I know of. I mean, no one has, accused me of cheating or something. Well, listen, at an extreme, I just want you to know that I did not go to ChatGPT and write a prompt that says, give me a 50,000 word book that explains how to be remarkable. And, 30 seconds later, there's the book. I mean, it ain't that simple.
Right.
But I have not really heard any criticism. And even if I did, I would not change my mind. I think AI has made me a 2 or 3 times better writer. And another product that I use is called Quillbot. And Quillbot, I used it to help me clean up my writing. And like in my mind, my moral obligation to my reader is to produce the best book I can for them to be remarkable, which is different than saying for me to produce the best book I can by myself, right? I mean, if you're a reader, you don't care if Guy used AI. You don't care if Guy used whatever, 2 sticks and rubbed them together. All you care about is that the book worked. Now, there's some legality about plagiarism, and there's no plagiarism in my book. But, I mean, when push comes to shove, you just want a book that helps you do what you want to do. And I will use a metaphor. So let's say that you are a foodie, you love great food, and you go to these restaurants, you love great food. Do you go back into the kitchen and say, okay, I want to see what tools you're using. I don't want to see any microwaves. I don't want to see any electric knives. I don't want to see any convection ovens. I don't want to see any food processors. I don't want to see any mixers. I want you to do everything by hand, by yourself. Who does that? What do you care? If the food is good, the food is good, right? And that's how I look at books.
Yeah, that's a great example. So we know how you used AI to just help support some of the writing. How can people use AI to make a difference in their lives and their careers and become remarkable?
I think that anytime you are writing something or creating something, there's a role for AI. Now, obviously, you can push it to the edge and you could say, write me a 250-word essay or, whatever. And I mean, I would say that's cheating when, you give ChatGPT such a prompt that it's like, write me a chapter about the influence of slavery in American history, and it spits off an answer, right? Although I will tell you, if you were assigned to write an essay about the history of slavery and the impact of slavery in the United States, it would not be so bad to go to ChatGPT at the start and say, okay, tell me all the effects slavery has had on the United States, just so you can check your list against its list, right? I don't see anything wrong with that. Mm-hmm. So now, if you're a quote unquote regular person, I think anytime you need to write anytime, let's say your insurance company, you get in a car accident and your deductible is $500 and they also cap and they say, all right, so for your car in that condition, for what happened, the most we will pay is $2,500. And then you go to the body shop and they say it's $7,500, and you go to your insurance company says, tough luck, pal, we said $2,500. So then you whip out ChatGPT and you say, ChatGPT, write me a stinking letter to my insurance company, tell them I've been a customer for 20 years. I probably have paid $50,000 in premiums. I have not submitted any damage, claims in the last 20 years. And I'm telling you, this car, I took it to the best body shop in the county because I wanted the best job done, and I expect to get fully paid. And ChatGPT will spit off a letter, and I swear your adjuster will get that letter and say, holy shit, we should just pay the guy $7,500 because I did this.
You did.
So, I mean, now, okay, so that's one example. Let's say that, you're an entrepreneur, you own a restaurant, and you get a lot of Yelp reviews, and you know that if you responded to Yelp reviews, it creates interaction, and it will help the marketing and branding of your restaurant. But you're not exactly a writer, and you're kind of busy. You gotta buy the fruits and the vegetables and the meat and the chicken and the lobster and all that. Then you gotta make sure everybody shows up, and then you gotta open and you gotta fold the napkins. You gotta do everything, right? And the last thing in the world you want to do is like, okay, now I got to go react to negative Yelp reviews or positive Yelp reviews. I'm telling you, just throw ChatGPT at the problem. Just put the review in and say, ChatGPT, respond. I'm the owner of the restaurant. I really appreciate this feedback. We focus on organic, handcrafted meals or whatever. Give them an answer. And then if you get really creative, you go to ChatGPT, you say, okay, so give me an answer, but make it a poem. And ChatGPT will write a poem about, thank you for your feedback. We really appreciate your keeping us on track. We hope you are a longtime customer because we love you. I can't think of another word that rhymes with customer. But anyway, so that's where ChatGPT is better than I am. And then if you really want it, okay, next time you go and say, okay, ChatGPT, draft me a Yelp response, but make it a rap song, and ChatGPT will do that. And I swear to God, I love ChatGPT. I love what it can do. Oh, and then don't forget, now we have generative AI, right? So, make a picture of me expressing gratitude for how much you like my lobster. How are you going to beat that?
Yeah, I'll just hire Guy Kawasaki to do the work for me.
Yeah, you can hire me to do your prompts. And
yeah.
Okay, in a somewhat related response, I'll tell you that a company pitched me about building Kawasaki GPT. And of course I said yes. So this company has built Kawasaki GPT, literally. And the data set in there is my books, including this book. This book is in there. The transcripts of all of my podcasts, my YouTube videos, my TED Talks, my blog posts, everything is in there. And so you go to KawasakiGPT.com and you can literally ask me questions like, how should I pitch this, or how many slides should I have, or what color background should I have, or, how can I be gritty? How can I have growth? How can I show graciousness? How should I apologize? You can ask everything you ask me. You can ask Kawasaki GPT. And I promise you that Kawasaki GPT will probably give you a better answer than Guy Kawasaki himself. and okay, my last thing about this Kawasaki GPT is this, that I am often asked to write a foreword, or to write a blurb, or to write a article to contribute to, some publication. And I swear to God, I go to Kawasaki GPT and I ask myself to give me a draft of a foreword, give me a draft of a blurb, give me a draft, 500-page, a 500-word article about how to be a good evangelist. And I let ChatGPT take the first pass, and then I edit.
That's amazing.
It's so effective.
I'm going to definitely check that out. And it's available for everyone to use?
Anybody can use. And not only that, it makes me immortal.
Yes, it does. Guy Kawasaki forever. So who would you say is the most remarkable person you've ever met?
Probably Jane Goodall.
Yeah.
It's hard to top her. She's 90 years old. She's still as active as ever. She's on the road 300 days a year, which is about 295 days more than I could handle being on the road now. And she is so pure, so graciousness, and so graceful. I think she's the most remarkable person alive today.
Yeah. So after, all these stories and, all this wisdom that you have across the pages of this book, what would you say are sort of the key lessons or inspiration you want readers to take away from Think Remarkable?
I just want them to, this is very practical and tactical. I want them to read the book and figure out, this is something I can use in my life, like immediately. This is a tactic. And, before every section of the book, and there are, there's at least 88 sections. Before every section, I pose 3 questions. Like, if you are wondering, 1, 2, 3, 3 questions, this particular section is for you, because I don't want people to read the whole section and say that was totally irrelevant. I can care less about anything in there. So, people don't even do that for their entire books, right? I did it for every section of the book. So theoretically, you should not waste your time on not even 2 or 3 pages that's irrelevant for you, because I let you pre-qualify yourself.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that's very helpful. And that's why it reads more like a guide, right, and a roadmap than it does an actual book.
I want it to be like, I would like every parent and grandparent to give it to their kids after graduation. I mean, I really think it's a life manual.
Mm-hmm. And with so many things that you are currently doing, have done, how would you say you have grown lately?
Well, I certainly have gained weight. I hope that, I'm in the last third of my life, and I'm trying to preserve or establish really my legacy. And I want my legacy to be that I helped empower people. So this podcast and this book is, my kind of representation of how I want to be remembered, helping people.
That's great. And what is it that you want to be remembered for?
I want to be remembered for empowering people to make a difference. That's it.
Yeah, great. Well, this was great, Guy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it was my pleasure.